like to call the Climate Protection Working Group meeting to order at 2:02, and we'll start with the land acknowledgement. On Tuesday, October the 7th, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. Hello, Marianne. Hey, we just got started. We've all had a chance to look at the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll recommend the motion to approve the agenda by Nate and seconded by Sue. And then if everyone had a chance to read through the minutes of September 10th, were there any amendments to the minutes? None noted. So I'll recommend a motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Now I'm looking at you, Steve. Okay, seconded by Nate. All in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so we will move on to number 4, disclosure of monetary interest. Are there any disclosures at this time? None noted. Moving right along, we'll go on to priority issues, and it looks like we have a item called management engagement by Sue.
Okay.
Not by me.
I will speak to this. So
Okay, by Richards.
the reason why this is on the agenda today is because we were discussing it last meeting.
Oh,
And so
okay.
this is moving us into M2. So we're discussing how to approach management.
Okay,
So that's why Sue's name, because she brought it up, but it was for our own conversation purposes.
all right.
Yeah.
So you're going to speak?
Yes, I
Okay,
will.
perfect. Thank you.
So hopefully you can read everything. Can you read this here? I try to change it around so that it's not as boring as last time. And here is my take. So we know that the town obviously has some town assets that can contribute to GHG emissions, right? So the whole point in approaching management is to get their consensus for how they would like to attack some of the issues that are creating energy emissions and how they would like to reduce their emissions in those areas. So we're trying to build not really a business case, but a case for them to reassess how they're doing their operations and seeing how they could find ways to either reduce or mitigate any sort of operations that are creating GHG emissions. So that was kind of my approach today, so that they can understand that this is where we're at. How do we get to a reduction in some areas? And are you willing to work with us so that we can sort of see some remarkable changes? So this is before we sort of like go to council for any sort of request for funding. This is just to see what is possible at the management table. So I think what it will be is be a first of a few conversations, but there will need to be an initial conversation just to broach the subject, and then for them to come back to us with what they think is reasonable, so that we sort of like meet in the middle somewhere. So I'm just gonna bring back just the emissions from last. I know that we were having a conversation about splitting in the water and the sewage, and I did that here just so that you can see where the reductions could be possibly taking place. So for the sewage and treatment infrastructure, we have that at 32%, and that's one of those larger emission sources. So that would be an area that we could bring to the management table, specifically water and wastewater. So I think that's like public works, to see if they have any ways of either reducing it through some sort of changes, maybe retrofitting, or if they have a process that they're exploring. Because I think any of these suggested changes will require funds. So they either have to reassess it in their own budgeting, or if they're looking for additional grants elsewhere. And another area also would be the water treatment infrastructure, because that's another area of high emissions. With respect to corporate buildings and facilities, I think a couple of years ago, a lot of the buildings either were built recently or retrofitted. I don't know if there is any more capacity to retrofit, but that would be an open conversation with management to see if there is any buildings on the horizon that are yet to be retrofitted or upgraded. And with respect to the corporate fleet, I think there is a plan in place to eventually electrify all the existing fleets. I don't exactly know where they are in that process, but I know that's something that they're doing now. So I think that's an ongoing project. And with respect to corporate waste, I don't think corporate waste is a huge issue. That's just an ongoing maintenance issue. And with street lights, they were upgraded to LED lights a couple years ago. So I don't think LED lights for the street lights are going to change at this point. So the biggest areas that would be addressing would be the water treatment infrastructure and the sewage and possibly the buildings in terms of areas to reduce emissions at the corporate level. Any questions?
Just to clarify, by approaching the town management as opposed to the elected officials, does the town management have the authority to make these types of changes to infrastructure without approval from elected officials? I thought that they would need to take their marching orders from the council.
That's right.
Okay.
But I don't know if they already have it in their operations to either reduce emissions in some areas or what's within their capacity to do so already. Because I think some things, when it comes to infrastructure or capital spending, there's a certain limit until you go to the procurement process. So I want to know what's already within their budget and what they're looking to do or what they have not considered.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, I think it certainly couldn't hurt to get it. You never know. Maybe somebody has a great idea for how to do something, and we certainly want to create an opportunity to hear from people for sure. I know there's a bunch of things the town already has underway. Like we're in the process of going through the permit process for the biochar program.
Oh.
And that we seem to be making some real progress on.
So the biochar, that's like a waste diversion?
Yeah, it's taking all the town's green waste and converting it into biochar and then using the biochar for remediation projects in town. And the town's been ordered to remediate the compost site. And that's where we were planning on making the biochar anyway. So what we're proposing is a remediation effort there, and the idea is to also plant fast-growing trees there that can then be cultivated and used to plant elsewhere. But there's already like substantial stuff that the town management and like a lot of the people on the team are like leaning into it real good. It's great to see. I think it makes a lot of sense to reach out to everybody that could potentially. I would even go beyond management and just say like, anybody on Team Smiths Falls that has an idea for how we might reduce emissions, because you never know where a good idea is going to come from, right? That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Can we know what the town is doing? So that's really interesting. And when you say the towns. I think you said green waste. I'm not sure. Is that just corporately or is that the residential?
Residential as well.
Too? So there's a plan then to collect that?
It's already collected and brought to the compost site. It's a 300 cubic yards.
Waste, not kitchen waste.
Correct. Green waste, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So not like the green bin program, but this is just a
tree waste.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. But I think it would be really good to be starting a database now with all those details, right? So that we can know and others can know what's happening. And we can be looking at that for future potential too. So that would be really helpful. But the other key thing I'd like to say is that in the approach to town management and staff, that it be made clear to them what the global targets are with greenhouse gas reductions, the national targets. So we're not talking about just dealing with the fringes, right?
Right.
We are, as a committee, we are actively looking for substantive reductions. And that's what we're looking to them for.
Right.
Too. So there's an approach which says you just take the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff to do, right?
Right.
But then there's another approach which says you have to leap forward and do something more substantive, right? And you have to open up that creative mind space for people to be thinking about those big leaps.
Right. I like that. I think framing the conversation as this is where we are and this is where we need to be, and how do we get there? The rest of the slides really were just more of the information from the community side. When it comes to looking at on-road transportation for the community, for example, I think that would be part of a greater conversation with respect to how to encourage different forms of transportation. That won't be done at the management table, but I think it'd be a consideration that that's something that they play a part in when it just comes to providing other sources of transportation. So they may not be putting into their budgets right now, but it's something that would come back to them and say that this is something that you should consider.
Can you remind me? I know we had a conversation about EV chargers last meeting, and not to rehash that whole conversation, but
That's
is
okay.
there one at the town? An EV charger? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Are they expensive to have one of those?
I actually do not know.
installed, or-
I recently learned about the different levels, so
Yeah.
I understand that they. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we had a plan at one point to put some in the parking lot on Market Street.
Okay.
Through an organization that was going to potentially have some financial assistance for that. That sort of fell apart. The cost just went through the roof.
Okay. I wondered.
There's currently a plan in place, I think still underway, to put like 2 at the Memorial Community Center.
Okay.
But it's also a matter of understanding what grants may be available or what the actual cost will be. And I'm not sure, but I think they've ran into a bit of a challenge with even just the cost of trying to. That's not. That was something else. That's more of a generator thing of trying. What else we have to do with the arena? But so it's still underway. I think, as far as I know, I haven't heard anything different. But we did put one at the wastewater plant. One water plant, I think, and I think one's coming for the wastewater plant. We have 2 electric Ford Transit vans in public works. So those are their primary to serve those 2 vans. But as for greater charging infrastructure, it's come forward before to try and do more. It's more a matter of what kind of assistance we can get to cover the cost. And frankly, it's more expensive than simply putting a pedestal up and hooking and putting something there. Right? It's the electrical supply you need to have to that site
Interesting.
to make sure it's adequate,
Right.
And
which adds to the cost, unfortunately.
You're talking all level 2 chargers?
Level 2 is what has been worked on, like for the rink, and what was considered here. I think the electrical requirements for level 3 are cost prohibitive.
We're talking like whatever, 60, 80,000. Yeah. But level 2 is a few thousand generally.
I think you can buy the unit for a few thousand, or maybe 4,000 or 5,000, but it's
installation and
and getting the
The copper wire and the
adequate power
Interesting.
supply.
but and sorry, would these be for public use for?
Yes. Yeah. So what was originally visioned for the parking lot was for public use. The arena is public use,
And would they be free or would they? Have
likely through a partner.
Yeah. Okay. So
Would that
charge.
charge? Yeah.
Okay. A notion there to stimulate activities to actually make this a perk for town staff, that they get a recharge for free.
Oh, is there some future staff coming in that this is available for? Yeah. I'm sure they use it in their promotional if they have it.
It
Yeah.
doesn't cost you much at all,
We should have one or 2 here for sure.
Yeah.
To help with that.
but it'd be free for their personal vehicles.
Okay. Yes.
Right. So it doesn't cost the town much at all to do that. I'm presuming you all have, a healthcare program and various other perks, right? And so you build that one in, and then it becomes something that motivates people to think about buying an EV themselves, right?
I think when it comes down to our strategies, if we want to encourage EV use in the community, it's a matter of having that charging infrastructure or playing a role in ensuring that there's adequate infrastructure here, both corporately but also in the community. And whether that's the arena, maybe it's at Lower Reach Park, maybe it's at the Market Street parking lot, so that you can get people to park there and utilize the downtown, right?
Mhm.
Go and have dinner, do some shopping while you're waiting. All those principles. So But so I think looking back to how do we bring a strategic approach to that, and maybe if we can do some of the work in trying to determine what grants may be available to help support that, or what partnerships may be there to help support that.
Yeah, I think having, I guess, an awareness of what's available financially allows the project to be more viable.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on. So we're looking at project updates. So for the project updates, I have finished a survey. It's available there. I didn't print too many copies because I didn't necessarily know if you wanted to go through every line by line item. This is just to review it if you hadn't seen it at all. But in terms of the milestones, we're initiating milestone 2, which starts with the survey, and also part of it would just be the emission reduction targets. To calculate the emission reduction targets, right now I'm interviewing different companies and NGOs who could do the work to see if we could get a set of quotes, so that we can bring it to council saying that this is how much it will cost us if we're going to use a consultant. And one of the benefits of using a consultant is that when we're discussing the targets, it can become rather political when you're looking at the data in terms of like whether we should be at this number or at that number. Having a consultant allows them to be a third-party facilitator. So it kind of reduces the possible tension. So instead of the town coming and saying, these are the numbers we're working with, take it or leave it, we have the consultant who kind of opens up the conversation and allows for people to make a decision based on the fact that it's not just the town proposing the numbers, but that it's been done independently and there's no bias that way, so it's an easier process. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking for a consultant or an NGO who does that kind of work. So the ongoing work is done right now. The hope is that once the survey has been out for 3 months, that we'll evaluate the data. And after the end of the data, we'll have a report to the committee just about the data that's been collected and what the work has been done in terms of calculating those targets. And then once that's been done, we bring it to council to make a decision. So that's sort of the ballpark. I'm hoping to have that done by the end of January, hopefully. So the work to look for a consultant has begun already. So we'll see. We'll get back to you once we have someone.
On the topic of the consultant, I guess I could see a scenario where we would all be very happy that we got a consultant. Like I could also see scenarios where it's not a great solution, frankly. And I guess my first question is like it's not immediately obvious to me that bringing in a consultant removes the question of politics. My question would be, what are the politics of the consultant? Like, are we bringing in a consultant that's there to show municipalities how they can help achieve real emissions, or is it someone who's skeptical that it's even possible and wants to suggest much lower emissions? Like, to me, like you say, private consultant, that doesn't speak to me of any kind of real authority the way like a group like this that is brought is constituted from members of the community that's setting the goals. I thought we're supposed to be that kind of political thing that helps bring forth suggestions there, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it is possible, but the question then would be who on the committee would do the work. I didn't want to put the burden on the committee unless that's something that you guys are offering. Because as you're an advisory body and it's great, but unless you have the capacity to do the work, then we're open to the conversation. But I don't want to assume that that is something that the committee is already doing.
Which work specifically are you referring to in that?
So it's one thing to set the targets. You know, we can go with the federal targets. Nothing wrong with that. But how do we know that those numbers kind of align with the town's objectives to reach a certain goal? So the math that goes into it, the technical aspect, I don't have that capacity. So that's why I'm reaching out to either a consultant or an NGO in that field to do that assessment for us. But if you're proposing that someone on this committee could do that assessment, then we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to assume that that is something that is the committee's responsibility. Obviously, if the data has been done for a third party, you would have an opportunity to assess the report that's been written and provide feedback. But I wasn't expecting you to do the actual assessment itself.
Fair enough. And just to clarify, are we talking about modeling?
Yes.
Modeling what specifically?
So we're modeling scenarios, right? So we're either using the scenario that we're going with the federal objective of net zero by 2030, or we're going with a different number based on what we select is appropriate for Smith Falls. But that modeling, that assessment, that data analysis, that's the capacity that I don't have as town staff. So that's why we're looking at outside help.
Okay, I'm just I might know some options here, so that's why I'm trying to just parse this out. In terms of what we're actually hoping to get a firm number on,
Right.
Is it if the town were to set a goal of net zero by 2050 or 2040 or whatnot, is that realistic? Is that the question?
That's the first question. And the second question, how do we get there? What initiatives do we need to recommend to get to that number? And then the conversation with management is, can we commit to those initiatives that we propose to get to this number? And then council will say, yes, this is something we support based on the findings, go forth and do it. Or we're going to actually bring it down and say that this may not be within the scope of reality right now. Let's just revise that number. So that's sort of why it comes a bit tricky, especially the political aspect, because we're committing the town to a voluntary program, but it's a 10-year process. So unless they're willing to commit to these initiatives based on the number that we propose, we have to be on the same page. So a third party allows us to, not be biased in the numbers I'm proposing or the recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think Sean had a
Yeah, I think so. To reinforce what Richard says, I guess, we would likely, if we could probably all agree today that our target should match IPCC or global or federal standards. We could say, well, we want to make sure we're down 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. We could probably settle that today. But when it comes to council committing to that, it's the how, and what's the cost related to that how, and what are the potential funding opportunities that are out there today. I'm not knowing what would be there in 2 years or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's having some understanding of if we want the town to commit to those targets. I think I would say for some on council, there has to be some understanding of how and cost.
Right.
And recognizing that if we want to make sure we get widespread support or complete support or sufficient support, that those details and maybe that impartial third party, no, impartial is not the right word, because I think it's more the expertise, the credibility that comes with that. We come at it with varying levels of understanding and expertise here. We bring probably a similar level of passion and purpose between all of us. But when it comes to setting a path that can get us to those targets, I think there needs to be a deeper understanding and recognizing it from a corporate standpoint is water and wastewater treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And fleet. Those are the ones we need to address. So what do we have to do to make the changes necessary to hit the targets? That means we need to completely redesign our wastewater treatment plant, completely go off of natural gas, pelletizer method of dealing with solid waste. We might be looking at, I don't know, is it a $5 or $10 or $15 million retrofit of that building? And if that's the case, is that a 5-year plan to say, here's what we need to do? Even if we want to do it tomorrow, it's probably still a 2 or 3 year plan minimum to do all the studies and work to get that underway. So I think it's the understanding that's needed to ensure that we have full council support.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I guess what I would say is the idea of setting goals for a long-term path to net zero is generally supposed to be a pretty low bar, that you're not asking for everyone to commit to some very detailed, go spend this amount of money. I would love it if it was the case, but instead it's kind of an empty promise that is made by governments around the world as an objective. It's a pretty, basically the people that vote no to an aspirational goal of being net zero a generation from now are the people that are kind of climate change deniers and whatnot. Even if you don't see a path in 5 years or 10 years, a goal that's 20 or 30 years out, there's all kinds of technologies coming online. No one can definitively say whether it is or isn't realistic to get to net zero in 20 years. Maybe everyone can agree it's not in 5 or 10 years, but the future's not knowable in that way. And the politics of this are such that there's an entire political party that would tell you it's absolutely not realistic to try to achieve our climate change goals. And honestly, half of the other party would probably tell you something similar to that, where they wish it was possible, but it's and yet, I certainly don't think it makes sense to try to do the short-term ones. I think we should definitely make the goal get to net zero. And the question is it 30 years out? Is it 40 years out? Is it 50 years out? And maybe you pay a consultant to give you that number. But honestly, like to me, the key thing that we're trying to do here is marshal resources quickly and efficiently. It's about how quickly can we respond to this crisis and how efficiently can we use what limited resources we have to do that. And that's why like I'm a little concerned about using money on a consultant, like maybe a little bit of money, but I know there's a lot of people in town are kind of already upset with how much money gets spent on consultants. And if we spend money on consultants for this, I think that might eat a lot of the appetite anyone has for doing anything for climate change. You know what I'm saying? Like,
how would you scope it down then? If you don't want them to do the whole bit, I think Sue has a question.
Can I just throw in here? So just to clarify first. So FCM, PCP, ICLEI do not have the capacity to do any of this modeling that we're talking about.
Not to my knowledge.
That has been promised by them for many years. And so I just need to be absolutely sure that they are not in a position to do that.
They have not proposed to me that they would do the modeling for me. So they suppose using the online tool, they can help review some aspects of the tool, but insofar as offering their own expertise to do the modeling themselves, they have not given that to me. So for all intents and purposes, it's not on the table.
Okay, would you mind just checking back with them because they have promised this for years, okay? Anyway, okay, so that's that. So the other thing too, though, in terms of costs, and I do respect that issue, and I respect that a consultant can go, super deep and spend a lot of time doing this. But just to know, right now, the town of Perth is looking for somebody to update their data from their 2017 plan.
Right.
Mississippi Mills has just started a committee. They're going to be looking at collecting their data.
Interesting.
Right. North Grenville is just starting a committee. They're going to be looking for somebody to collect their data. So there's opportunities amongst a grouping of lower tiers, I think, to possibly contract one person.
So one person for all of the municipalities?
Makes sense to me. It really does, because there's so many things that are similar. So I would just encourage you to talk to those respective other lower tiers, right? Yes, they're at different places, but there could well be some synergies here that would make it less expensive.
Okay.
I just want to know, like, you received a text from Councillor McKenna, who he had planned to be here, but something come up that it makes him unable to be here today. But one has regrets.
I just have a question, Richard. Can you speak to then just the order of the survey? Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, so the modeling is for both the corporate and the community targets.
That's correct.
Yep. And then so the initiatives that are outlined in the survey, if we're getting people's feedback on that, and that's not something that council supports, should we be asking them at this point, or does this come after that whole modeling happens?
So you're saying that if talk supports in terms of what the modeling is proposing?
Well, I guess some of the initiatives, because I understand, like when Sean was talking, that council has to know, like, sort of like, what would these things cost, over how many years, kind of thing. So the things that are outlined here as suggested initiatives, are we just asking just so that we know if there's an appetite for it, or by asking them?
We're asking because we want to know if there's an appetite for it. We're not really asking to commit council to anything that we're proposing. Okay. This is just to get a feel for what's out there. This survey is intended to be going on for 3 months. I think people's ideas will change as to learn more information. But I think council needs to understand what's happening first and foremost. Yes. I know that council has their own objectives, so this is really just to align the community's objectives with what council is proposing, so that they can understand that there is some appetite there. Whether or not this influences their decision is to be known. We don't know yet. We're hoping that they're obviously going to be on board and choosing the provincial, energy reduction targets, but they could change their mind, right? So this is our opportunity to get them to be on our side, which I think they will be. It's just how we get there is the process. So the survey is intended to just stir up some public conversation about what's happening, get some input, and just see essentially what they'd be down for. And then once we, get to the end of M2, when we select our targets for the community and corporate, we at least have some understanding of this is what they proposed, this survey kind of reflects that, council made a decision, and then we go on to write a national plan in M3. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so for M3, I was discussing earlier, the proposal is that their actual writing period will take 3 months. Now, these are ideal circumstances. Hopefully it doesn't take any longer than that. And then once the plan is done, we will have reports to the committee just on the plan itself. And then we will have a circulation period for 1 month. I don't know if the circulation period for a month would be too long. I think that's sufficient. And then once it's, finalized and everyone has had a chance to review it, there'd be an open house for the public to also get an opportunity to review themselves once the draft has been sort of finalized between the committee and also town. So this is sort of the long stretch. Are there any questions, or are we just trying to absorb the information right now?
So just to clarify, that 3 month of writing takes place after 3 months of having people do the surveys.
Yep.
Is there a reason those can't happen in parallel?
I've been thinking about it actually. If we can just keep writing it and also get feedback.
It doesn't feel like we need 6 months to do those. It doesn't, honestly, it feels like we could do the survey in 1 month and the report in another month and be done in 2 months. Just my take. And I hate to be a broken record on the rushing thing, but we're responding to a climate crisis emergency. And I think a big part of how we should be judged is the speed at which we approach this. And I don't think
you're proposing a shorter timeline for both.
I'm not saying it has to be a month and a month. I'm saying giving us 6 months to do this seems like a very long time. And to the extent that we could shrink that, I would be inclined to shrink it down to a month and a month, but I'd be open to hear from other people what they think.
Certainly, I think it could be lesser, but I'd be thinking of it in parallel for sure.
So the same process, just shorter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but in parallel.
Yeah. So at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. For us to be. So at the county, it took us more than a year to do the plan.
I would not want it to go that long. I was hoping 3 months.
So part of it was we were bringing, all sorts of ideas to the table, right? And I don't know how you might be thinking of that. I mean, yes, there's a million plans around now, and we certainly can just be adopting, a bunch of actions that are in existing plans.
See, that's what I was thinking. Just using certain actions that I generally would agree with, and put it in the draft plan, and then we'll see what sticks when it comes out to the survey at the end. So we draft.
No, I wouldn't be that reliant on the survey to dictate.
Not so much dictate, but
the plan.
Okay.
Because we are more expert around the table.
Sure.
Right? The challenge comes, frankly, in the modeling, right? And figuring out what the priorities are in the plan, the priority actions.
So we can figure out what we're going to, I guess, do an initiative on, but what comes first will be determined based on modeling.
It's really interesting. I've always found it interesting that the process, the PCP process, right, has us set the targets without the modeling.
Yes, that's kind of why I'm going back and forth on this.
But really, you sort of need some modeling in order to figure out what more realistic targets are, except you want targets to be ambitious, right? Because you want that driver.
Yes.
Because we are in an emergency, right?
I totally think so.
We cannot do 5%, So there's part of it, and there's a chunk that we don't know the future. We don't know, what may come along in the next few years that will allow us to make that leap, right?
So you're proposing that once the survey is live, we can also focus on writing, drafting
Absolutely.
some
Because
plan.
we can pull a ton of stuff from existing plans, right?
Okay. So how would you roll out the review process internally? Let's say I draft something by the end of, say, December. how would we review it and do it properly so that we all have a chance to review it? But because it's going to be lengthy at the end of the day, so I'm not expecting everyone to have read it back to cover, but I'm wondering if there would be at least one person on this committee who would take the review process along. So if I'm writing something or getting assistance, that there would be another set of eyes on this committee to also review it, not expecting everyone to review it, but at least one dedicated person. That would be, we would be open to doing that.
Maybe what you do is do a little bit of a draft template for how you're envisioning, action, who does it, time frame, start date,
I can bring that back for the
Sort of
committee
thing.
next if that works.
and we can approve a template,
Yeah.
and then we can go forward with it.
Yeah, does that work for the committee?
In terms of modeling, I think maybe we're just thinking about modeling a little bit differently. Not that anyone's wrong, just I guess I just think about it in different terms. But for me, like the reason why I'm still focused on trying to have us use the scope 3 is because if you only look at a third of your carbon footprint, then modeling solutions, it's mathematically impossible to get to net zero or even to get to 50% emissions reductions if you're blind to more than half your emissions. Just full stop. We can't achieve anything like the national targets using a scope 1. And most of the things that you could do, or at least a lot of the things that you can do to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, you can only see in a scope 3 analysis anyway. So to me, like if we're going to do any kind of modeling of options, we have to use the scope 3. Otherwise, we're only modeling a third of you know what I'm saying? It full stop there. But I guess, yeah, that's the main thing that I wanted to say in terms of the modeling process. I think if we're going to go forward with something like that, we should definitely use the scope 3. And as we roll out a draft plan, I think it's fine to review it in terms of like language and whatnot, but equally important to that is scoring it. And I'm happy to take a stab at scoring it. Maybe that's something we bring in a consultant for, because that's less political, but if you're proposing we do X, what will that actually get us in terms of a reduction of our carbon footprint? And because this is fundamentally a math problem, and there's a whole lot of things that people do for climate change in the name of climate change that don't make too much of a dent. And then there's some things that make a huge dent. And in terms of a strategy that makes sense, it shouldn't be what gives us warm fuzzies. It should be like what actually is going to have the biggest impact. And so, yeah, I would volunteer to do to take a first stab at the mathematical scoring of whatever we're talking about rolling out.
Okay.
And I think that part might make sense to get a consultant in for.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I also like to echo what Nate was mentioning. Scope 3 is important for people to really understand what is that, our choices, and so on, how it really affects our overall emission. And once we identify those, then it's reason to now share with you some sources. Example, food is one major one. But if we understand which part of it actually carries the largest carbon footprint, are there any alternatives? So those then will be able to be helpful. I now have a choice, even though I'm not the producer. But if you're just looking at, what is that you do that influence that, it's tougher. Because there are very few things that we actually do ourselves. Unlike in older eras, we did everything ourselves.
Interesting. I can definitely see the merits of a holistic process. So the next slide just focuses on the fact that the survey is going to be live on the CPWG webpage, and that there will be paper copies available in town, and there'll be a notice meeting in the Record Journal for the next Wednesday. Just an update on the progress on the survey.
And social media? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, that's also part of the update as well. Social media will be included. Yeah. And also, we have a webpage. So we didn't have one before. So it's under planning land use. So if you go to the town website and you're able to navigate it, hopefully, under planning and land use, there's a section called Climate Protection Working Group, and that's where all the information is with respect to the Climate Action Plan and progress and the contact for staff. And this will just be the landing page where all information relating to our progress on the plan so far will be there. So that would be something that is available now.
Just to get back to the timelines.
Good? Yeah.
Just for clarification, so are we shortening the timelines then, or are we?
The timelines will be shortened and they'll be done in parallel. So right now, what I'm hearing from the committee is that if we have a template for what the climate action plan will look like, and we can focus on maybe just structuring that, then so once you give me direction on the template I proposed, then we can go forward just populating it and creating more initiatives. So yeah.
And sorry, Richard, for all my questions. Will the plan be written with is it mitigation and adaptation, or is it just mitigation at this point and adaptation's coming later?
That's a good question. I know that for the Atlantic plan, they included both. And I know that's part of the milestone framework once you select your initiatives is to put them in practice. So I think adaptation and mitigation should go hand in hand. So that'll be part of my recommendations as well. So it's a lot more complete.
Just to add, it seems that in including adaptation now, you set yourself up for more money too. So
yeah,
why not?
Okay. Makes sense.
But I still like to see when we put the survey on, we should have some incentive for people who undertake that survey.
All right, yeah.
So that we can encourage more participation. And that also, before the survey, we should actually have publicity so that people are really aware that the survey is now available and why it's important. Otherwise, we go through it just the exercise.
Yeah, we tend to get pretty good feedback from most of the surveys we do. I think it's the distribution and awareness. And I don't know if we want to, like my concern with putting too much information ahead is are we leading the conversation then to predetermine the outcome? If we're providing, if they were an existential threat to mankind, and we know that the carbon emissions that are emitting, if we don't reduce the carbon emissions by a certain amount, we're going to be in really difficult situations, and within a few years, will that taint the potential results? Will people be less objective because we've influenced them in the
That's more of a style preference. That's more of a style preference, how you frame the conversation.
Yeah.
I know that people have different opinions on how best to frame it, so I'll leave it to the committee to provide their opinions on that one.
Oh, maybe Steve first.
I just have a question. What will be considered success for you on the number of responses?
For me, so if I get more than 30 on this in a month's time, that's a success for me. I know that...
A small sample for the size Smith.
Oh, I know, but for us to get true sample size representation, the only way for that to do properly is to mail it out. And I don't know if they're willing to mail out that many surveys to the populace based on just the nature of the questions and people's general interest. If this was a higher stake, not even the official plan is being mailed out as a survey question, you know what I mean? Like we're having a public open house, people come and participate. I don't think this will be the last time for this conversation publicly. Of course, when it gets
30 should be fairly easy.
Yes, I think it should be. I know that we're putting it in schools as well. So we're trying to hit up the common areas that people are frequenting. So we're trying to improve our distribution as best as possible to encourage the participation. But unless we are mailing it out or forcing people to do like a census, it'd be hard to get a higher rate for participation. We just have to hope for the best, really.
What has been what's been successful when you said?
I would think 10 times that should be very achievable.
Yeah.
I would say we should be definitely in the hundreds, I would expect. That's not uncommon for some of the feedback we get in those ranges, I believe. It's good. I mean, to Richard's point, it's all a matter of what we feel comfortable with as for reasonable results. But I would think we would have, if it's widely distributed, I think it's enough of a concern for enough people that they will tune in, or it's enough people who are the non-believers who will also want to get out and express their opinion, let us know that we're just simply barking up the wrong tree. So we'll probably hear that as well.
That too.
We'll go Sue and then back to me.
So I would not set a closing deadline on the survey.
Okay.
And so that gives us the freedom to be running it as long as we want to, basically.
And if you're not waiting on it to start the climate action draft writing, then I guess there's no point. Yeah, you're right.
Don't conclude it then. And sorry, to your point, Sean, about not tainting the discussion, I would argue vehemently that there are enough forces out there that are tainting the discussion in the wrong way right now. And so that it's our obligation, frankly, to speak on behalf of the natural world and the devastation of the climate crisis. So I think we have an obligation to preface this with some information about that.
So I guess it'd be what the preamble states. And is it, I think the work of the group is important, I think, to state. We wouldn't want to talk about targets, I don't believe at this stage, no. But, yeah, I guess I'd like to see what type of preamble we could come up with.
Well, I mean, to literally just, pull some quotes from the IPCC, pull some quotes from, sorry, I never get his name right, but the United Nations head on this, right? I mean, those are pretty good quotes, right? So.
I think also we can provide information that states that yes, we're in a climate crisis, but that there's something that we can do about it. So providing that hope piece for people, because sometimes people can get paralysis and they're like, well, there's no point, I don't know what to do anyway. So I think using simple language and relating it to what's real, like, I mean, you just look at what's happening right now, right in the States. It's just, I wouldn't want to throw that out there, but it's hitting everybody daily now. So I think people are, the environment might be really good right now to get some information out there, but not in a fearful, scary way, more in a, this is a reality and this is, but we can do something about it.
I like that. More proactive.
So two things, I guess, in terms of just stylistically on that, I think I echo what Sue was saying, that I think we will seem more sincere and authentic if we make no bones about the fact that we're serious about addressing the climate crisis, and the climate crisis is real. Like, the only people that don't think the climate crisis is real now are like hardcore science deniers, and I don't think we need to entertain that political view. Now, the question of what is a realistic approach to tackling it, I think, is totally fair game, and their politics is all over the place, and there's, and that's a completely different question. But the idea that climate change is real and we're in a real life or death crisis here, I think is just an established fact at this point. And for me, when I encounter a source of information that is trying to be so nuanced that you can't get any kind of a bead on where they're coming from, I'm less trustful of that source rather than more. One that's just authentically passionate about climate change, okay, you're in that category. And for everybody that doesn't believe in climate change, they're going to put you in that category anyways. And for me, I think it's better to just be authentic about that. Just circling back to something that was mentioned a moment ago, of looping in adaptation. I think that's really important. I really like that. We haven't really discussed that. I think it's totally spot on that it changes some of the funding opportunities, and particularly I think around health and whatnot. Also, the politics of it, a lot of people aren't excited about a 30-year plan, but the idea of like a cooling station in the park or something, they can get real excited about. So like the adaptation, I think, is a really key component. And just speaking as a numbers person, the thing that jumps out at me on that subject is we're not scoring that at all. And it's much more challenging to score. But I think if we are going to loop in adaptation into how we do this, we should think creatively about what kind of metrics we might use for like, what does success look like there? What would, you know what, I don't have great answers to that. I got to give that some thought. I'd encourage everyone else to as well. But like, we should be scoring our level of adaptation and where there's room for improvement and incorporating that into the goals that we set.
Interesting. Scoring our level of adaptation. Can you explain that a little bit for me?
Okay, so I guess fundamentally, like the idea that everything we're doing in climate change is a numbers game, and like it's like cleaning up an oil spill. It's just greenhouse gases are invisible, and so the whole challenge of doing the analysis here is about taking an invisible gas and making it a quantifiable thing that you can get your arms around. Okay. The same is kind of true with adaptation. It's not like it's very real. It costs money. It involves doing a bunch of stuff. But if you don't describe it, in real terms, it's more or less invisible, and it's challenging to quantify. Like, you really do need to, like, we need to be thinking about like how many people in our community have access to air conditioning. I think that would be a great metric for it. So, there's like, we should think about all the different ways that other communities are adapting and preparing for what the future of climate change will have. I would put food shortages on this list too. I would put like disease preparedness on this list too. But you look at all of those things that people are doing to adapt, and where, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where Smiths Falls currently on that level of preparedness, and where, I think it's the principle that in order to manage something, you need to be able to measure it. And so, yeah.
So I understand that from a principles perspective. So for a real world example, so let's say we're trying to have a program to retrofit residential homes. Mm-hmm. So you want to know how many homes needs to be retrofitted first, and then see how well we are retrofitting over the years. Is that sort of the measurable aspect?
Yeah, the retrofitting I think would be more challenging. I'm more thinking in terms of like it's a like scorching hot heat wave. We've got what health unit is telling everybody to stay inside. For some people, staying inside is not safe because it's too hot. Other people, that's like a refuge. It would be lovely to have that demographic, like putting in a cooling station in the park that's just misting is, like, cost-wise relatively trivial, and it might be like one of the most profound things we could do. You know what I'm saying? And like, same with food shortages issues, like in terms of seeing where adaptation would have a biggest impact and where,
Sorry, so I understand that. I just don't understand the metric part. So how are we actually measuring the adaptation? So I understand like where the adaptations have a benefit, but how are we trying to measure that?
So the measuring is going to be the challenging part, but in terms of the metric, I think just thinking out loud here, I think probably a lot of it would be population based. Like, what percentage of the population currently has access to air conditioning? That is a knowable metric. Okay. I know that I think you could break that down in terms of seniors. I think are most at risk from heat waves. The heat waves kill a lot of seniors every year. It's really like that is a really measurable, like, heat related deaths, I think would be one of the adaptation things we could be measuring. Like,
can we get that in Ontario, please? Ontario doesn't.
Yeah.
Quebec measures deaths by heat. BC does. Ontario doesn't.
I didn't know that, really.
So
wow.
Can we maybe get that here?
Yes. Interesting. I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. I'd be interested to see what is measurable and how.
Yeah.
I know we're in the exploratory phase right now for that writing phase, so it'd be interesting to see what we can actually measure and what is more of just a general information, general principles to adopt. Interesting.
And I'm just going to say this in my update, but I might as well say it now because it kind of links in with what you're saying, Nate. So the health unit, we are working on a climate change health adaptation vulnerability assessment report. I can't remember the exact, and I know a few of you have been involved in interviews. So we will have some of that data on what are potential, climate hazards and what populations are vulnerable. So we will probably have some of that information gathered, but it won't be specific just to Smiths Falls. It'll be Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. But I think we're similar enough to our neighboring communities that I think some of that data will be helpful in looking at adaptation planning. So our report's supposed to be done by the end of December, so it might be helpful in contributing towards the adaptation pieces of it. And I also, on that same note, there was a webinar that I sent around to the group, and it was can't even
was it
remember
called?
the title of it now, but it was focused. It was through AMO, I think, wasn't it? And so it had municipalities that came together and provided just information around different solutions that they've done in their community. It was very, very interesting. There's a lot of talk about resilience hubs now. Instead of just designating a cooling center or a warming center, they're talking about hubs that can be used all the time, but then they're absolutely designated during those times of need. So anyways, I think there's lots of
Intriguing.
good ideas out there that we could definitely pull on. So sorry to hijack your conversation.
No, that's good. I think it's a good segue. Right now, we're segueing into project updates. So there is one grant that looks promising. I'm going to give a little bit more details about it. It's called the Municipal Energy Plan Program. And essentially, it's a federal program. And essentially, it's designed to improve energy efficiency, reduce energy consumption, GHG emissions, which I think kind of falls in line with creating the Climate Action Plan. So the goal here is that, I would apply or the town would apply, and we would see how much we shake out from funding. Now, with returns of the stream would be in stream 1, just because we're a municipality creating a new plan. And in terms of funding, hopefully you can read that. It covers up to 50% of the cost and 90,000 for a new plan, but we have to be matching that 90,000, so just be mindful. And 25,000 to continue working on an existing plan. So the funding would go to all these aspects, such as stakeholder engagement, gathering baseline energy data and analysis, and creating a plan.
So just to clarify, would this grant could fund this effort?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the idea. And it's open all year round, so this is just a matter of applying. I have to speak with finance to see how the application process actually works, because it's done through, I can't remember what the acronym's called, but there's a process for applying for municipal grants, for federal grants.
That was the pilot program that I was hired under at Tay Valley.
Really intriguing.
And I would suggest that you look at this in terms of those other lower tier municipalities and the possibility, because everybody likes partnerships these days,
Intriguing.
right? So if Mississippi Mills is at their startup point right now, maybe
Well, under
there's
the same thing, we just kind of pull our resources together.
well, and pool the human resources, right?
Interesting.
I don't know, but anyway, I certainly would have a look at that, Richard, about that collaboration.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you after and we'll figure something out. So that is the program that's come up, and so we'll be applying for it this year or the next, hopefully. Yeah.
And how long would it last?
So that was not clear. So in terms of funding, it seems to be open until I guess there's no money. That's my guess, anyways. But it's open right now, and so it doesn't make sense to sit and wait. So I'm going to try and apply and see what happens.
Good.
So I'll provide an update once there is one to provide, but that's just the grant that caught my attention this month, and I'm going to be applying.
Great.
Yeah. In terms of roundtable items, there's only one thing. So for motivating net zero action in rural and remote communities, that was something that was put on by the Quest organization. And so they did their initial reviews with town staff in terms of information that would be relevant to this research. And now they're looking for participants or interviews from the community. So this would be your opportunity to suggest to me any person who would be, I guess, applicable for this research program, and if they would have a person that could be interviewed. It's just a call for interviews. So yeah, we would be under the rural aspect, if you're wondering. No need to provide names right now, but if something comes up and you have an idea for someone who would be a great person to interview, you can shoot me a message and I'll connect them with the researcher and we can go on our way.
I'd certainly be interested.
Okay,
And
great.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
No worries.
You just looking for individuals
Yeah.
or businesses?
No, individual. So you could be from the community. You could be representing a business. It doesn't necessarily have to be a local person, but just because it was from me to Smith Falls, but anyone with a business or a person of interest. So yeah. And that's all that I have for roundtable updates.
Thank you, Richard. You've done a lot of work, so thank you for preparing all that.
No worries.
Maybe we'll move on to roundtable updates then. Maybe Peter, we'll start with you, if that's okay down at this way.
Okay, actually, we had an interview with
Oh, you did.
your colleague.
Danielle.
Health Unit is undertaking a survey of climate-related actions when it is impacting on health or otherwise. So Nate and I had over an hour
Oh, good.
chatting with her. Yeah. And it's nice that when the work is done, because Health Unit, your communication aspect is picked up by a lot of people. It's a good way to share what is possible, right? So that's one, and Nate, you may supplement me more. Then in terms of other things there, Rio and Roundtable actually had a wetland awareness tour that I sent information to everybody, and it was well received. This time we actually incorporated about 30 minutes of water testing, and all adults enjoyed it. These are the things that we were involving kids to do it. And as well, we have now successfully planted the first mini forest in Smith Falls. And you will find a lot of good pictures on the Real's Facebook. Okay, there are some drone shots that otherwise we won't get. So that's very positive. Back to Roundtable, we share with you of a program that we call Eco Literacy Program, or Rideau Literacy Center of Excellence Program, that Roundtable is working with now 6 regional libraries to get kids from grade 1 to grade 6 involved in terms of environmental activities and so on. We will definitely involve them in the swale or wetlands to learn about biodiversity, water, and all that, follow up with on land actions with the libraries. Okay, and hopefully this is going to be a long-term thing. We were lucky to get a small grant. Small is about 27,000 from Trillium. So that means that we now can engage a person who will help with the community survey and put things together. So this is the start.
Amazing.
And I also like to announce too that we got funding from the Main Street Community Activator Program to help promote the Pedal Fest.
Oh, good.
Okay, so this is now going to be enabling us to be stronger on our web delivery in terms of e-commerce and so on and so forth. Hopefully, it will bring awareness and tourism and all the other things. It's also nice to see that the town now has a tourism coordinator who will be working to put things together and get people involved so that we can now have packaging. And this Thursday, we're going to try to have a tour of Orchard Canoe and Heritage House Museum side by side, so that after the tour, they will have a visit to Heritage House Museum. Ended up, not this time, but in the future, Victorian tea. This time, we will have a lunch provided by Tim Horton.
Wow.
Sponsored by Tim Horton. So we will have, the tour is targeted for tourism groups, and we will have Ontario Highlands group and Parks Canada and some local groups to participate. Hopefully, this will yield some more dialogues and more good things to happen.
Intriguing. Awesome.
Thanks, Peter. Sean, do you have anything to?
The only thing I guess is council made a decision last night to replace the decommissioned Confederation Bridge. And so this is the bridge goes into Centennial Park from Backwest Street, We had to make a decision in 2015 to take it out of service due to engineering reports indicating it was no longer safe as a crossing, not for vehicles or pedestrians. Sat idle for the last 9 years, and the decision last night was to replace it with a timber structure. And I guess from an environmental standpoint, we know the submissions we received and having reviewed them, I don't have the numbers, but certainly a far more, I guess, climate-friendly method of replacing a structure than to build a steel and concrete bridge. So it's only going to be an active transportation bridge, and frankly, I believe it will be a real attraction for our community. We decided very early this year that we want this to be more than simply a river crossing. We want it to be an experience that people, both citizens and visitors could enjoy. And so it's wider. We'll have 2 lookouts, one upstream and downstream. Fairly high arch, a single span, and with a roof. It'll be built essentially in a factory in BC by Structure Craft. They come in, their bid, it's just the base of the 1.9 million. We've added some additional features, which bring it up to about 2.1 million. But it was about, well, over $1 million less than the next lowest bid, and about $1.5 million, $1.6 million, $1.7 million from where most of the bids come in. So I don't believe they've built a structure like this in Eastern Canada.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be the first, and it should be in place by the end of June, right? Early next summer.
Wow.
So finally, it's a very exciting night to see the support for that, and I said it's very unique, and just proud to know it's going to be much more environmentally friendly. There's a good chance we've applied for a grant because it is a timber structure, and we moved into the next, I guess, step in the process, which is positive. If we're successful, we can pay half the cost. But again, like anything else, it's this funding opportunity is oversubscribed. But well, we'll keep pushing forward, and hopefully we can get some money to help pay part of the cost.
Intriguing. That's actually awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
I just wanted to echo what Peter was saying. We met with your colleague Danielle, and you can actually, I'm sure, speak to this far better than me. But I guess I was unaware that the health unit is taking climate change so seriously, and they're proactively looking at the big picture and making the connections between climate resilience and disease spread and heat issues. And it was a fascinating conversation we had, even around like climate anxiety with children and depression, and just it was like taking a really holistic big picture look at it. And they're working on this document that I guess is supposed to come out early in the new year. And anyway, I wanted it to make sure it's on everyone's radar, and they're interested in finding ways for collaboration and whatnot. And I think there might be a lot of opportunities for collaboration with this group, and in terms of how the town rolls out its climate change strategy, that to the extent that we could work, like even just using the information that's contained in that document to better make our case. And yeah, I don't know. It was a really positive thing, and it's exciting to see what comes out of that process.
You want to share something about MOEE, the work for the town project?
Oh yeah, sorry, I should do that too. Sorry. Yeah. So the project it's been a long time in the making. Over a year ago, we approached the town council about converting the town's green waste into biochar, and it passed unanimously. It's very well received. The municipal staff has been amazing with the project, and it's turned into a lot more work than anyone expected. We did like an initial pilot thing where we brought in a large machine to make biochar, and we filmed it and met with other municipalities, but we ran into some regulatory issues where they wanted an environmental survey done, and then it turned out the site that we were wanting to do it was also the ice melt site, and there was an environmental remediation order around heavy metals. Wow. Anyways, long story, we were able to submit an application for doing an experimental remediation project on that site. And we recently met with a bunch of the different bureaucratic levels. It was like 9 people at this meeting that all need to sign off on it. And they're incredibly helpful and supportive of the project. And they gave us a huge homework assignment that we got to circle back. But this is really gaining steam and moving forward. And it looks like we're going to be able to do this remediation project on an experimental basis for 1 year. And then with the results from that, make a request to extend it for longer. But yeah, we also successfully hired an intern, Joshua, and I've been working with him. We're building a bioreactor for that project. So yeah, things are going really well with that.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Nate? Steve, do you have any?
No, nothing from me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sue?
A couple of things. So yes, I too participated in the health unit survey, and that was very interesting and promising. And so a few things. So we, as CNL, we have finished our series of Electrify Lanark workshops, and the very last one I did just last week on adaptation and resilience planning for the household. And I did that, and we have an article in the Hum on that too. I did that because I couldn't find anybody who was fairly knowledgeable about that at this point, and it's fascinating. So the feds only came out with their plan a couple of months ago. The province, as far as I can figure out, is only still doing emergency planning from, the old stuff. Lower tier municipalities have, if we're lucky, maybe started to integrate some climate considerations into their emergency planning, but really, haven't done very much that way. The county has its plan in development, and is actually seeking input from people, seeking names of people who would like to be consulted on that, residents, that sort of thing. So that might be something we want to promote. I don't know, has there been opportunity yet to discuss this with the county to see about
Not to my knowledge, but
partnering or collaborating? I think that discussion should be had. I think it would be really helpful.
Okay.
Just take advantage of what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
But it was really interesting because we may be aware of issues, but clearly this has not really started to happen yet in any formal
Setting.
structure. So that's that. And then I would just add too that through our efforts with Climate Network Lanark, Nature Canada is one of our major funders and supporters, and they really like what we're doing, and they said, are there any other groups doing what you're doing? And so I'm aware of lots of little initiatives. And so Nature Canada and we are starting a community of practice. Starting next week is our first meeting. And this will be for Eastern Ontario, Southern Ontario, similar types of organizations or initiatives. I mean, there's not many of these are actual formal organizations yet, but grassroots community groups that are doing climate action.
Awesome.
So we're starting that next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and so for the health unit, it sounds like everybody knows what health unit is doing, which is really good. And once that report's due, I could probably invite them to come here to provide an update on it. I think that would be really great. And other than that, the only other thing is I'm going to be attending Planet Youth Lanark County. That's a community-wide initiative. It's a substance use prevention program, but it's really very upstream health health promotion focused, enabling kids to feel safe in their communities and choosing things that will prevent them from starting to use substances. Anyways, how that's related to climate change is only that they're having a Changemakers Summit on October 25th. It's a PA day, and it's going to be held at the Smiths Falls Community Center. And so they're trying to get kids all across Lanark County to come to this day. And they're going to seek their input on what they want to see from a youth perspective within their communities. So I know this committee at one point had talked about having a youth representative on this committee. So I'm not sure what's going to come out of that day, but if there is, any discussion around climate change, I'd be more than happy to sort of chat with some of the youth there, if they're from Smiths Falls. And then the other idea I had on that is, could we, on your new page, could we put something about looking for youth representation?
I like that.
Just to get that voice, I think, at the table would be really important, especially going back to your point around youth and eco-anxiety and all that. They want to do something, right? Yeah. So, and that's about it for me right now. Any other questions or comments? No? I think the only thing Marie and I discussed when we first arrived is this meeting should be going till 3:30 and not 4. I get so from now on, it'll be from 1:30 to 3, unless we have something super duper. Yeah. We'll just defer
2 p.m.
next. Oh, sorry, 2 to 3:30, right? Yes. Yeah. All right. So I'll recommend a motion to adjourn the meeting at 3:18 by Nate, seconded by Steve.
Okay.
All in favor?
The next meeting's on the 12th of November, by the way, guys.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Yes, November 12th.
Yeah.